was just thinking about something about the difference between Republican-run states and Democrat-run states. Let me know if you've thought about this, and if you are a MAGA, what's your response?
So in some way, this TikTok contains everything you need to know about American politics.
Imagine if blue states had a 40% higher murder rate than red states. Imagine if blue states were only 29% of America's economy and red states were 71%. Imagine if 9 of the top 10 states to get federal welfare benefits from the government, these handouts, were blue states. Imagine if 9 of the top 10 states for maternal mortality and infant mortality were blue states. Imagine if 9 of the top 10 states for gun violence and gun death were blue states. But you know why you never hear Republicans cite those statistics? Republicans scream about law and order, but have a 40% higher murder rate than blue states. Republicans scream about the economy, but 71% of the economy is from blue states, only 29% from red states. Republicans claim they despise the federal government, but 9 of the top 10 states to get federal handouts are red states. Republicans claim guns make us safer, but 16 of the top 17 states with gun violence and death rates are GOP states. Republicans claim they are the party of pro-life, but 9 of the top 10 states for maternal mortality and infant mortality are Republican states. So Republicans and MAGAs, here's my very simple question to you. Everything you claim your policies will do, our policies actually do. So my question is, what exactly are you fighting for?
So this TikTok by Kasim Rashid Esquire points out the core result, that is the fact that everything Republicans say they want is really achieved by the Democratic Party. But we really need to dive into this to understand what the Democratic Party is, what the Republican Party is, why they're in conflict with each other, and why the results that they say they're going to get never really quite add up. You see, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are both, at their core, capitalist parties that support capitalist institutions, but they have slightly different philosophies towards capitalism. The reality is that the Republican Party believes in this completely unregulated, unhinged capitalist system where basically wealthy capitalists are allowed to do whatever they want, and they think that the free market will sort everything out, everything will take care of itself. Whereas the Democratic Party believes that the capitalist system requires some management. It works in general, but with a few tweaks in management, it can work more equally for people. But here's the real problem. The reality is that he's right. What the Republicans say they want is actually the result that the Democrats actually get. And that really should be a red flag to all of us, because ultimately that's kind of part of the problem, isn't it? Now, in order to understand why, we really have to understand something about capitalism. You see, capitalists, by their very nature, have interests that are in direct conflict with regular working class people. Landlords and tenants are inherently in conflict with each other. Landlords want all the money that tenants have. Employers are in direct conflict with their employees. Employers want to make all of the money possible while paying their employees as absolutely little as possible. Now, I know, of course, there's specific examples of like, oh, this business owner's really great, or this landlord is uniquely good, or whatever. I'm talking about the core, bare bones financial incentives that are driving most people's behavior within this system structurally. So with the Republicans, you see a lot of violent crime, you see extreme marginalization, you see extreme poverty and homelessness, and all of these things running rampant. But that is actually something that the capitalists want, because the more desperate that people are, the more willing they are to accept lower wages. And the more you have things like racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., the more you have hyper-marginalized classes of people, the easier it is to funnel people into prison systems where they can work as slaves for giant corporations. This is something that institutionally capitalists want and are perfectly fine with because it will increase their profits. The Democrats, however, are really running an impossible task. That is, managing capitalists while also maintaining a capitalist system. You see, giant companies still to this very day, even giant companies that are in blue states, will fund extreme right-wing politicians and will constantly be undermining democracy, will constantly be undermining any type of progress that is ever achieved for working class people, whether that be, racial equality, gender equality, you name it. Especially when it comes to core issues like the rights of labor unions and things like that. These giant companies, even if they're playing well in democratic states, will very often fund extreme right-wing politicians because they realize that their bottom line would actually be helped by these more regressive policies that violent crime doesn't actually hurt giant companies. It just hurts poor people, which makes them more desperate, which makes them willing to accept lower wages that these giant companies are fine with. And it has the added bonus of doing propaganda for the police so that people will beg for more police funding, who will then over-police communities and throw them into prisons where they can once again work as slaves for giant corporations. And so really, what is the result? The result is that the Democratic Party, who believes in the sort of management of capitalism, they get the results that Republicans say that capitalism would achieve, because capitalism can really only achieve good things when there's a very strict hand from the government actively controlling and suppressing some of the worst aspects of it. But the problem is, if you are not taking an adversarial role with capitalists, and if you think that capitalists by and large will do good things, then you're willing to accept donations from super PACs, you're willing to accept all of this money in your political system, so that basically these giant capitalists very often will play both sides, where they accept that some degree of management through the government can be helpful to these giant corporations, but they also recognize that it would be a lot easier at the end of the day if these giant corporations just privatized everything that the government did in the first place. And that tension will never go away as long as we have a capitalist system. But what do the Democrats say they will achieve? And that is something that's really important. Democrats say they will achieve things like eliminating extreme poverty. They say they will achieve things like ending homelessness or curing cancer, you name it. But the Democrats never really are capable of fully fulfilling those promises. I mean, I live in Minneapolis, for example. It's a city that's run by Democrats, and yet we continue to get these neoliberal austerity measures, and we continue to get increased spending on police, despite the right wing saying that we've defunded our police. And that is fundamentally because, despite the promises of the Democratic Party, unless they're willing to take an adversarial role against capitalists, unless they're willing to use the power of the state to suppress capitalist exploitation explicitly for the benefit of working class people, then they will never really achieve the goals of what they are saying. And now, there are some Democrats who are starting to say that they're challenging capitalism, but by and large, the Democratic Party as a whole views itself as being able to collaborate with capitalists in order to achieve the results that they want. But this really is politics in a nutshell. Fundamentally, both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party want to work with wealthy capitalists. They just want to work with them in slightly different ways. Republicans believe in this unregulated ridiculousness, which obviously causes a lot of chaos and extreme poverty and suffering. The Democrats want to do some things to alleviate some of the poverty and suffering, but want to do it in a managed way that doesn't help everybody and doesn't really go after the core essence of the problem. But now we have a growing socialist movement within the United States that is actually willing to challenge capitalism at its core, to say that the state should take a direct role in suppressing the exploitation of capitalists to the benefit of working people. And those are the people who would be able to actually get the results that the Democrats say that they can.